The room is quiet except for that single sound, the relentless beep of the monitor beside me, each tone reminding me I am still alive, still tethered to this frail body. I thought my daughter would walk in with flowers, maybe even a smile, something to soften the weight pressing on my chest. But instead, she entered with a stranger in a suit. His shoes clicked against the linoleum floor, his briefcase shut like a steel trap. She didn't look at me the way daughters do when they're worried. She looked at me the way someone looks at a safe that won't open fast enough. And in that moment, as the lawyer pulled out a stack of papers and clicked his pen, I realized the cruelest betrayal isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It walks in quietly dressed in black and blue ink, asking you to sign your name away. My name is Thomas Walker. I'm 68 years old and I live in Ohio. I've worked hard, I've stumbled harder, and I've tried, God knows I've tried, to love my children the best way I knew how. I never imagined that in my weakest moment, my daughter, Claire, would stand at my bedside, not with tenderness, but with a lawyer waiting for my consent. That sting cuts deeper than the IV needle in my arm. Before I go on, I want to pause and ask you, where are you watching from tonight? Are you on your couch, maybe in your kitchen with the light low, or lying awake in your bed with the sound turned down just enough not to wake someone else? I ask because sometimes telling this story feels like whispering into the dark, and knowing someone is out there, listening, nodding, maybe even feeling the same ache, helps me carry this weight. So if you don't mind, tell me in the comments where you are, because this story isn't just mine. It's ours. Back to that hospital room. Claire stood on one side of the bed, the lawyer on the other one. The papers spread out like a battlefield map. They spoke in soft tones about durable powers and responsibilities. I let them talk, but I stayed still, too still. I wanted them to think I was weaker than I was, because deep down I knew I couldn't give them what they came for. Not then, not ever. And as the monitor kept its rhythm steady and unforgiving, I made a decision. I would not pick up the pen. Not today. Not for them. Not when I still had strength to protect what little remained mine. And that was the moment the real battle began. They called it a durable power of attorney. Just a few words on the top of the page, typed in stiff black letters, as if permanence itself could be folded neatly into paper. Claire leaned closer to me, her voice soft, rehearsed, coaxing. "Dad, it's nothing serious, just a safeguard." The lawyer beside her added the kind of smile you see on billboards, practiced, hollow, and meant to disarm. But I knew better. I knew what just a signature could cost. Years ago, another just a signature took away more than a truck. It took away my pride. Back then, I trusted too quickly, handed over the title because I believed in promises made with warm eyes and gentle words. Within weeks, that truck was gone, sold off in a deal I never saw coming, leaving me staring at an empty driveway and a deeper emptiness inside. It wasn't about the steel or the wheels. It was about my name, stripped of worth with a single line of ink. That memory still stings, a scar that no one sees but me. Now, lying here with IV lines tethered to my veins, I feel the same weight pressing down. My daughter's eyes flicker with urgency, not love. The lawyer taps his pen against the clipboard, waiting. They both mistake my silence for weakness. But silence, this time, is my shield. I let the moment stretch, let the beeping of the monitor speak for me, louder than my trembling voice ever could. It's strange how betrayal never arrives the way you expect. It doesn't always crash through the door. Sometimes it slides across a table, clothed in legal terms, dressed in false security. And sitting here, I realized I could not afford another careless stroke of my pen. My past mistakes echo in this room, warning me. I will not repeat them. I will not hand over my life disguised as paperwork. The beeping grows faster, mirroring my pulse. My daughter mistakes it for fear, but it isn't fear, it's resolve. And as I stare at that space where they want my name to rest forever, I know the answer must be no, not yet, not ever. And that's when I understood the true fight hadn't even started. Nurse Maya moves quietly, almost like she has learned to disappear into the background. She adjusts the IV, straightens the sheet, and her eyes linger on me in a way that tells me she has seen this scene before. Not with me, not with Claire, but with others, other fathers, other mothers, other families torn apart by paper and signatures instead of fists. Her presence is gentle, but her silence is heavy, almost protective. I notice how her hands steady the line as if she's giving me more than fluid, more than medicine. She leans down and whispers, just low enough that the lawyer doesn't hear, "You don't have to sign anything today." Just 10 words, but they fall into me like rain after drought. The way she says it, soft, certain, without judgment, breaks through the fog of guilt and fear. I realize I'm not imagining it. This isn't paranoia. Someone else sees it too. Claire glances at Maya, suspicious, then back at me. Her eyes plead in one direction. Maya's voice steadies me in the other. It feels like standing at a crossroads with no strength to move, yet knowing one wrong step could cost everything I've worked for. The lawyer clears his throat, tapping his pen again, impatient. Maya doesn't flinch. She simply smooths the blanket and lets the silence hang. It's as though she's daring me to believe I still have a choice. So I make a decision. I let my eyelids droop, let my breathing slow, let them think I'm weaker than I am. If they believe I can't resist, then they won't be ready when I finally do. For now, I play the part of the fragile old man who's too tired to understand what's in front of him. But inside, I'm sharpening my mind, holding on to Maya's words like a lifeline. Because sometimes, the only power you have left is the power to wait. And waiting, I realize, might just save me. I let my eyes stay closed, my breath shallow and uneven, as if I were drifting on the edge of sleep. It is easier that way, easier to listen without their suspicion, easier to let their masks slip when they think I'm too frail to notice. Claire's voice breaks the quiet first. It isn't the sweet voice of a daughter worried about her father. It's low, sharp, and almost frantic. "I can't hold them off any longer. Yes, collections have already called. They said eviction in 30 days if I don't come up with something." The words settle heavy in the room, heavier than the beeping of the monitor. She thinks I can't hear. She thinks my body is too weak, my mind too clouded, but I hear every syllable, each one striking deeper than the last. The lawyer sits beside her, his tie perfectly straight, his eyes flicking to his watch as if his only concern is the ticking clock and not the crumbling trust between a father and his child. He doesn't even need to speak. His silence confirms everything. I am not their patient, I am their solution. It is a strange kind of pain, realizing your own daughter stands on the edge of ruin and would rather drag you with her than face it alone. I remember the warnings, the missed payments, the restless nights when I tried to steer her toward steadier ground. Each memory returns now, not as blame, but as grief. Grief that my love was never enough to anchor her. She is drowning, and instead of reaching for my hand, she's reaching for my wallet, my name, my life. The monitor quickens, the steady beep now betraying the storm inside me. I tighten my grip on the blanket, forcing my body to remain still. I cannot reveal what I've just learned, not yet. If desperation has brought her here, then desperation will make her reckless, and recklessness with papers like these could erase everything I've built, everything I've kept safe for the family that still depends on me. So I remain silent, my eyes closed, my body weak. But inside I begin to build walls. If Claire believes she can save herself by sacrificing me, she has underestimated the strength that comes from betrayal. Because sometimes the greatest clarity comes not from what is said to your face, but from what is whispered when they think you're asleep. The beeping in the room steadies, but inside me it stirs echoes of another rhythm. The clink of coins counted late at night, the sound of envelopes torn open with shaking hands, the silence of shame that filled our home, when the bills stacked higher than the paychecks. Claire's voice on the phone, desperate, cornered, drags me back to those days when survival came in scraps. I can still see myself standing in line at the pawn shop, the gold of my wedding band catching one last glint of sunlight before I slid it across the counter. The man behind the glass didn't even look at me. He just weighed it, scribbled a number, and handed me less than it was worth. I walked out with cash in my pocket and emptiness in my chest. I told myself it was temporary, but some losses linger far longer than the money they bought. There were nights when the refrigerator hummed louder than our conversations because I couldn't bear to admit to the kids that dinner would be smaller again. Nights when the phone rang and I let it go unanswered, knowing it was another collector, another reminder of failure. And mornings when I stared at the driveway where the old car used to sit, taken back because I was too late, too stretched, too tired. Those memories have teeth, and they still bite when I close my eyes. Lying here now, I wonder if those same shadows fell onto Claire. Did she watch my stumbles and learn desperation instead of resilience? Did she inherit not just my name, but my failures too? The thought burns more than any wound the doctors could stitch. It feels like all my sacrifices, all the silent humiliations, might have been for nothing. Because here she stands, trying to solve her storm by selling away my shelter. The monitor's beep cuts through my thoughts, steady and merciless. I stare at the ceiling, fighting the heaviness in my chest, not from the IVs or the wires, but from the weight of everything I lost before, and everything I stand to lose now if I'm not careful. The past is a graveyard of mistakes I can't undo, but this moment, this paper, this pen, I can still refuse. I owe myself that much, and maybe, just maybe, I owe Claire the lesson she never wanted to learn. The papers slid across the blanket, the lawyer's polished hand nudging them closer to me. At first glance, they looked official enough, neat fonts, heavy paper, seals printed faintly in the corner. But my eyes lingered on one detail, a single letter that didn't belong. My middle initial. Wrong, small mistake. But I knew better than to call it small. It meant they weren't careful. It meant they wanted speed over accuracy, control over truth. That wrong letter spoke louder than either of them had all morning. I cleared my throat, my voice thin but steady. Don't documents like these need a witness? Or a notary? The lawyer smiled the way people do when they think they're smarter than you. That can all be fixed later. For now, we just need your signature. His pen clicked again, sharp and impatient, like a clock running out of time. But his answer told me everything I needed. This wasn't protection. It was possession, a chain they wanted me to clasp onto myself. Claire shifted nervously beside him, her eyes darting between us. She wanted me to be tired, compliant, the same man who once signed away a title without asking the right questions. But I wasn't that man anymore. The wrong initial burned on the page like a flare in the dark, and I let it guide me. If they thought I was too frail to notice, then they would never see me coming when I pushed back. I leaned back against the pillow, letting my silence stretch. Inside, though, the decision was forming, clear, sharp, unshakable. That single error, that careless slip, was my warning. A father may forgive many things, but he cannot afford to ignore a trap laid beneath his own name. They had shown me their hand, and from this moment on, my silence would not be surrender. It would be strategy. The monitor beeped steadily beside me. But now it no longer felt like a countdown to weakness. It felt like a drumbeat, keeping time for the fight I knew was coming. And as I stared at that wrong initial, I realized something important. I wasn't the one making mistakes anymore. They were. I asked for my phone the way a sick man asks for water, slowly, with a tremor in my voice that made it sound like weakness. Claire didn't hesitate, maybe thinking I wanted to check messages or send a small text to Michael. She placed it gently in my hand, and I felt its weight as if it were the last tool I had left. I scrolled clumsily, my finger dragging across the screen, But I wasn't searching for my son's number. I was searching for Ray Cole. Ray has been more than a friend to me. He was the man who stood silently beside me 25 years ago when I buried my wife. He didn't bring flowers or speeches. He just stood there, a hand on my shoulder, steady as stone, while the rest of the world blurred. Since then, I've trusted him in ways I never trusted anyone else, and I knew if anyone could see through this fog of legal tricks, it would be him. When he answered, his voice was gravelly, tired, but alive with something I hadn't heard in a long time. Concern. I told him what happened. I told him my daughter had walked into my hospital room with a lawyer instead of Lily's. I told him about the pen that kept clicking, about the papers that spelled my name wrong, about the way the beeping in this room suddenly felt less like life and more like a countdown. He didn't interrupt. He just listened like he always has. And when I finished, his voice came low, firm, steady. "Tom, hold on. I'll be there. We'll do this the right way." For the first time in days, maybe weeks, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but hope. A fragile kind of hope, like light seeping under a locked door. I ended the call, slid the phone back, and closed my eyes. They thought I was fading. They thought I was already beaten. But I wasn't. Not with Ray on his way, not with the memory of that hand on my shoulder still guiding me. I let the monitor beep on, steady as ever, and whispered to myself where no one else could hear, "The fight isn't over, not by a long shot." Ray's voice lingered in my ear long after the call ended, steady as an anchor dropped into deep water. He laid out the options for me, speaking in that calm, measured way of his. A healthcare proxy, so Michael, my son, would be the one to make decisions if I couldn't. A limited power of attorney only for the bills, with safeguards, requiring 2 signatures instead of 1. Emergency trust instructions, so no one could touch the core of what I had built, not without clear conditions. Each word might have sounded cold and legal to another man, but to me, they felt like armor. Every safeguard he named was another lock on the doors I thought had been broken open forever. I could almost feel my pulse steadying, my breath finding its rhythm again. Nurse Maya glanced down at me, her sharp eyes softening just enough to let me know she saw the change. She didn't ask what shifted. She didn't need to. Instead, she whispered, "If you need a witness, I'll stand for you." Just like that, with a few quiet words, she became more than a nurse. She became part of the defense I didn't know I could still build. Meanwhile, Claire hovered by the bed, her brow furrowed, her whispers to the lawyer becoming more clipped, more impatient. They thought time was on their side. They thought I was drifting, fading, too tired to resist. But with every word Ray had given me, with every promise of his arrival, I felt a strength I hadn't known in years. Not physical strength. No, my body was still frail, tethered to machines, but something deeper. The kind of strength that comes from knowing you still have choices, even when the world is trying to convince you otherwise. I repeated a single sentence in my mind over and over, like a prayer. "I love you, but I'm not signing that." Those words would be my shield and my sword. They carried both tenderness and defiance, a father's heart and a survivor's will. I pictured the moment I would say it, how my voice would sound, how it would cut through the silence. I practiced until the words felt as natural as breathing. The monitor beside me kept its beat, steady now, no longer betraying fear, but keeping time with resolve. And as I lay there, waiting for the click of Ray's shoes in the hallway, I knew one thing with certainty: they would not win this easily. The sound of footsteps in the hallway broke the stale rhythm of the hospital, slow, deliberate, and familiar. When the door opened, Ray stepped inside, his gray coat damp from the rain, his glasses fogged at the edges. He didn't need to announce himself. His presence alone shifted the air. Behind him walked a notary, her arms full of folders, and tucked awkwardly among them a small bouquet of lilies. Lilies. the kind of flowers I thought my daughter might have brought, but never did. The sight of them pierced me in a way I can't explain, a reminder of what love should look like when a father lies in a hospital bed. Ray nodded at me, not at Claire, not at the lawyer, just at me. That small gesture told me everything. This fight was mine, and he was here to help me win it. He laid out the papers on the rolling tray table, each one precise, each word explained with care. Revocations first, to undo what was already vulnerable. Healthcare proxy next, naming Michael, the one I knew would guard me without question. Then safeguards, signatures, witnesses. It was like building a fortress brick by brick, but the bricks were ink and initials instead of stone. Nurse Maya joined quietly, placing her name beside mine as a witness, her pen strokes calm and unshakable. Claire shifted in the corner, her arms crossed tight, her eyes flashing frustration she could no longer hide. The lawyer cleared his throat once, then fell silent. He knew this was no longer his stage. As I signed, my hand trembled, not from weakness, but from the weight of what those signatures meant. Every stroke reclaimed a piece of me they thought they could take. Every initial was a step out of the shadows of helplessness. The bouquet of lilies sat on the table, their soft scent drifting through the antiseptic air, reminding me that even in this place, beauty could bloom again. The monitor kept beeping beside me, steady and relentless. But for the first time, it didn't sound like a countdown. It sounded like a drum, steady and strong, marking the rhythm of a man who had not surrendered. And as I set the pen down, I realized I was no longer the weak one in the room. The door opened again, and Claire entered as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. Her steps were faster this time, her voice sharper, trembling at the edges of desperation. "Dad, we can't wait any longer. The house, your accounts, they need quick decisions." Her hands fluttered toward the lawyer, who followed behind her like a shadow, his pen already in hand, his words smooth and rehearsed. "It's best practice," he said, his tone dripping with false assurance. "It's about protecting your legacy, sir, about protecting your family." I let them speak. I let the urgency coil tighter, filling the room until even the monitor seemed to quicken with their rhythm. Then I shifted, slow and deliberate, pulling forward the stack of papers Ray had left with me. My own documents, my own defense. I spread them across the blanket, the black ink standing sharp against the white sheets, revocations, proxies, safeguards, my name written in steady strokes, no longer trembling with fear, but rooted in resolve. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. The lawyer froze mid-sentence, his polished mask cracking, as his eyes darted over the pages. He knew exactly what they meant. Claire's face drained of color, her breath catching in her throat, as if the ground beneath her had given way. For the first time, she wasn't leading this conversation. She was standing on the outside, staring through glass at a life she couldn't control. "I've already made my decisions," I said quietly. My voice wasn't angry, it wasn't raised. It was the kind of steady voice that comes when a man has nothing left to lose but his dignity, and he's decided he won't part with it. I looked at Claire, at the daughter I once carried in my arms, at the woman now trying to carry away my life. "I love you," I said, "but I'm not signing that." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, already defeated. He gathered his briefcase with stiff hands, knowing the battle was lost. Claire, though, stayed frozen, her eyes glassy, her lips trembling with words she couldn't force out. She had brought a lawyer instead of flowers. She had come with power instead of love, and now all she was left with was silence. The monitor kept its steady rhythm, the lilies in the corner catching the low light. And as the room settled into a heavy, aching stillness, I realized the fight was no longer about signatures, it was about love, trust, and the line I had finally drawn, and for Claire, that line had already been crossed. The lawyer was the first to move. He cleared his throat, snapped his briefcase shut, and muttered something about being in touch. His voice was clipped, his posture rigid. like a man who had rehearsed his victory speech but never prepared for defeat. He left without looking back, the echo of his shoes fading down the hallway until only the soft hum of machines and the steady beep of the monitor remained. And then it was just the two of us, me and Claire. She stood there, frozen, her eyes fixed on the papers I had signed with Ray. Her hands fidgeted at her sides, her chest rising and falling too fast, like a child caught in a lie but too grown to admit it. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, heavy, unbearable, broken only by the rhythm of the machine beside me. At last, her voice cracked through, thin and jagged. "Dad, you don't understand. I was only trying to. I needed to." The words collapsed before they reached the end. She couldn't find a way to dress desperation as love. I looked at her, really looked at her. I didn't see the woman who had tried to take control of my life through paperwork. I saw the little girl I once carried on my shoulders, the one who used to fall asleep in the back seat of the car after long drives, her head leaning against the window. That girl had trusted me completely, and now here she stood, a woman who thought she had to manipulate me to survive. The ache in my chest wasn't just physical, it was the slow, quiet breaking of a father's heart. "I do understand, Claire," I said softly, "but help built on lies is no help at all. You can't protect me by trying to own me." My voice stayed calm because anger wouldn't fix what was already broken. Love had to carry the weight, even if it wasn't returned. Her face twisted, shame and anger warring in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might crumble, that she might sit beside me and finally tell me the truth. But instead, she turned sharply, her shoulders trembling, and walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me with nothing but the faint scent of lilies and the hollow echo of her absence. Relief washed over me, but sorrow lingered too. Because I knew I hadn't lost my daughter's love, I had lost her trust. And maybe, just maybe, that was the greater wound. The day of my discharge came with more weight than relief. Michael stood by the doorway of my hospital room, steady and quiet, his presence carrying the kind of reassurance I had once taken for granted. He drove me home without asking too many questions, his silence a comfort instead of a burden. When we reached the house, it no longer felt like a home. It felt like a battleground that needed to be reclaimed. Together, we began the slow work of shutting doors I never thought I'd close. Michael sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, his fingers moving quickly as we changed every password, bank accounts, email logins, even the old alarm system I hadn't bothered with in years. Each reset felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, yet each one also stung with the knowledge of why it had to be done. Claire's face lingered in my mind with every click, every confirmation code. My daughter, my blood, my threat. By the afternoon, the locksmith arrived, his tools rattling in a worn leather bag. I watched from the armchair as he worked, the metallic scrape of the lock being removed echoing through the hallway. With every turn of his screwdriver, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and safety. These new locks were meant to protect me, but they were also barriers against someone I once would have handed the keys to without a second thought. The sound of the new bolt sliding into place was louder than words, louder than Claire's protests, louder than the excuses I kept replaying in my head. As the sun began to sink, painting the house in long shadows, the locksmith gave a firm nod. "All done." Michael tested the lock, then looked at me with quiet resolve. I nodded back, grateful but heavy-hearted. My house was secure now, layered with codes, passwords, and keys that no longer included my daughter. A fortress built not against strangers, but against the very child I once promised to protect. That night, as I sat in the dim light of the living room, I realized I had done what needed to be done. Yet the ache in my chest told me the cost was greater than I wanted to admit. Because protection, I learned, doesn't always come with peace. Sometimes it comes with silence. Sometimes it comes with loss. It was evening when I heard the sound at the gate, the shuffle of footsteps on gravel, the faint rattle of the latch being tested. I walked slowly to the window, my body still frail but my heart racing. And there she was, Claire. Alone this time, no lawyer in sight, no briefcase, no pen, just my daughter, standing with a folded letter in her hands, her shoulders trembling. The light of the porch lamp caught her face, and I saw the streaks of tears glistening on her cheeks. She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She just stood there, waiting, her eyes searching the house as if it might soften and open for her. For a moment, I almost wished it would. For a moment I saw the child she once was, knocking on my door after a nightmare, clutching her blanket, waiting for me to let her crawl back into safety. But the years between then and now stood like the metal gate itself, cold, firm, unyielding. I pressed the intercom button, my voice low, heavy. Claire. The word broke in my throat. She lifted her head at the sound, her eyes wet, hopeful, but also filled with shame. I wanted to say everything, to tell her I loved her, to tell her I forgave her. But forgiveness without change would only lead us back here again. So I said the only thing I could: boundaries are not punishment. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. She clutched the letter tighter, as if she might raise it to show me, but her hands wouldn't move. The cicadas sang in the dusk, their endless chorus filling the space between us. I stayed at the intercom, listening to her breathing, steady and broken, until she finally lowered her head. She turned away slowly, her figure shrinking in the fading light, and walked down the driveway without leaving the letter behind. I stood there long after she was gone, my hand still resting on the cold metal of the intercom. The house was locked, the passwords were changed, the fortress held. But inside me, the walls were thinner. I loved her still. God help me, I loved her still. And yet, love wasn't enough to open that gate tonight. Not when the cost of letting her in might be losing everything again. The house was quiet after Claire left, the kind of quiet that pressed against my ears until I had to fill it with something. I sat at the old oak desk in the corner of the living room, the lamp casting a soft circle of light, and pulled out a stack of plain envelopes. My hand shook as I uncapped the pen, not from weakness this time, but from the weight of what I needed to put into words. The first letter was for Claire. I wrote slowly, choosing every word as if it were a fragile thread. I told her I loved her. I told her I always would. But I also told her that love without truth was poison, and I could not drink it anymore. I wrote that if she came to me with honesty instead of lawyers, I would open the door. But until then, the locks would remain. My heart ached as the ink dried, because it felt like both an offering and a wall. The second letter was for Michael. This one was steadier, stronger. I thanked him for standing by me when I could not stand alone. I wrote down the details of the accounts, the new safeguards, the codes and numbers that would keep everything in order if I was no longer here to guide them. I told him I trusted him, not because he was perfect, but because he had chosen to protect, not to take. When I signed my name at the bottom, I felt a measure of peace. The third letter was for myself. It may sound strange, but I needed it. I wrote, "Do not second-guess what you've done. Do not let loneliness trick you into surrender. Remember the pen, the papers, the lilies on the table. Remember that boundaries are not cruelty, but survival." I sealed the envelope with trembling fingers, as though I were binding myself to the promise inside. One by one, I placed the letters in the drawer where bottles used to sit, the same drawer I had cleared years ago when I decided liquor would no longer be my answer. It felt symbolic, as if I had replaced one kind of escape with another kind of strength. The wood groaned softly as I closed it, the sound final and solid. The lilies on the mantel caught my eye, their petals opening wider in the dim light. And I thought to myself, even in silence, something can still bloom. The nights are the hardest. The hospital machines no longer keep watch over me, but their sound lingers in my memory. That steady beeping used to feel like a countdown, each tone reminding me how close I was to slipping away. Now, in the silence of my living room, I realize I don't need them anymore. I can hear my own heart without wires, without screens. Every breath, every beat feels like proof that I am still here, still fighting, still choosing. The lilies on the mantel have opened fully, their white petals glowing softly against the dim light. They are nothing extraordinary, just a small bouquet carried in by a notary with tired eyes. Yet to me, they have become a reminder of what love should look like. Simple, gentle, given without a price attached. I sit and watch them as if they could speak, as if their quiet beauty could answer the questions that keep me awake. Why wasn't love enough for Claire? Why did she come armed with papers instead of comfort? I reach for the drawer where the letters rest, the ones I sealed in place of the bottles that once dulled my pain. My hand lingers there, but I don't open it. Not tonight. Those words are waiting, like anchors, for a future storm. But tonight, I just need silence. I lean back in my chair, close my eyes, and listen to the house breathing around me. The emptiness is heavy, but it is not without hope. Because even in her absence, even after everything, I still believe Claire can return. Not with a lawyer by her side, not with contracts or demands, but with the honesty of a daughter who wants nothing more than to sit across from her father and share a meal, a laugh, maybe even a tear. That hope flickers like a candle in the dark, small, fragile, but alive. I open my eyes again, staring at the lilies, and I whisper to myself the truth I cannot ignore. She can still come back, but only if she brings love, not papers. The night has grown long, and the hum of silence fills every corner of this house. I no longer hear the machines in my sleep, no longer startle at the imagined beep of a monitor. What remains is quieter, deeper, the steady rhythm of my own breath, the faint thrum of a heart that has endured more than it should have. I sit in the dim light and realize that I don't need wires to remind me I am alive. The very act of refusing, of drawing boundaries, of holding on to what is mine, those things keep me alive far more than any machine could. The lilies on the mantel are still standing, their petals open, their fragrance faint but lingering. They've outlasted the papers Claire brought. They've outlasted the arguments, the desperation, the pleading. They are simple, honest, unpretentious. And maybe that is what love was always supposed to be. Not a transaction, not a signature, not a weapon disguised as care, but something freely given, something that stays even when everything else falls away. The house is locked now, passwords changed, accounts secured. I should feel safe, and in a way I do. But safety has its own emptiness. The hardest part of this journey has not been the betrayal. It has been learning to guard myself from my own daughter, the child I once promised to protect no matter what. That wound cuts deeper than any loss of money or property. And it will take more than locks to heal. I know she may come back one day. I pray she does. But if she returns, it cannot be with a lawyer at her side or papers hidden beneath her arm. She must come with something rarer, something she has not shown me in a long time: honesty, tenderness, love. Until then, I will wait in this quiet, not as a man defeated, but as a father who has chosen to survive. I close the drawer where the trust papers rest, the locks clicking into place, and whisper to myself, I'm ready. Ready for the silence, or ready for the ache, ready for whatever comes. And as the night deepens, I sit with both sorrow and hope, knowing the story of Claire and me is not over. It waits unresolved, like a heart that keeps beating in the dark.